Welcome back. And now South Africa's official unemployment rate has increased to 32.9% in the first quarter of 2025, jumping a full percentage point from the last quarter. At 32.9%, the unemployment rate is at the exact same level as it was in quarter one of 2024. According to Stats SA's quarterly labor force survey, those aged 15 to 34 years are exceptionally vulnerable in the labor market. The youth unemployment rate increased from 44.6% in the fourth quarter of 2024 to 46.1% in the first quarter of 2025. Chief Economist at Econometrix, Azar Jammine, joins us now to unpack the print in greater detail. Thank you so much for your time, Azar. Very, very grim picture that has been painted there. Unemployment once again increasing in South Africa. What is holding us back from saying the worst is over?
No, I don't think we can say the worst is over by any means. But at the same time, I think it's important to recognize that during the first quarter of every year, the employment figures do tend to deteriorate and conversely, in the fourth quarter of every year, they tend to improve. This is because there are certain seasonal factors such as harvesting in the agricultural sector towards the latter beginning of summer, and the fact that at the end of harvesting, workers then get laid off. Secondly, you've got the Christmas retail season, where the retail stores tend to employ people on a short-term basis and then lay them off a few months later. And thirdly, it's the tourist season also in the fourth quarter of the year, and then that sees people being laid off in the first quarter of the following year.
Well, I mean, it's quite interesting because you talk about these seasonal factors, and of course we know that, those genuinely do paint a better picture in the fourth quarter. But even then, even the unemployment figures in the fourth quarter are never really significantly that much better. Is there a deeper problem that we are looking at here?
Of course, we're looking at one of the biggest economic problems of any country in the world. South Africa has one of the highest rates of unemployment. In most other emerging markets, you'll see unemployment rates of maybe 5, 10, 12%, not 32.9%. There are some endemic problems that are just not being addressed after 30 years of democracy. Instead, the government keeps interfering with more and more regulation that makes it even more inimical to for employers to want to take people on. And this was very well illustrated in these latest figures, which show how formal sector employment fell quite sharply, whereas informal employment actually increased. So if people in businesses in the formal sector are giving up on trying to comply with regulations and taking on workers on a full-time basis, they'd rather do without doing so when they can afford to. And that means that a lot of the youth or people coming on stream are obliged to try and eke out a living by setting up informal businesses.
And actually, just on that, I mean, it's quite interesting because we say that a crisis within a crisis is this youth unemployment. And really, that is supposed to be at our advantage, that the working age population is increasing, meaning that more people are of an age in which they can work. It's supposed to be what you call our demographic dividend. Are we just constantly missing out on that opportunity at this point?
We are constantly missing out on that opportunity for a number of reasons. Firstly, the youth are not being, on the whole, educated sufficiently well in order to add value, to be able to add value when they come onto the labor force. Secondly, the government keeps protecting large organizations and trade unions rather than opening up the market to smaller businesses and the opportunity to actually start entering the job market as an entrepreneur. Instead, what we see is the labor force has become is basically held hostage to trade unions who occupy that space and are reluctant to allow for a loosening of labor regulations to enable younger people to actually come on stream.
Yeah, and actually, I saw that there were employment losses in private households as well. Does that also signal the financial pressure on South African households? Because I would imagine, of course, those are people that you employ in your house, like your helpers.
Undoubtedly, it does reflect a lot of households are taking strain, and therefore the easiest way to save money is to basically do without having a private household. But what's made it that much worse is the continuous increase in minimum wages demanded by the government, which makes employment of private workers in private households that much less affordable.
Is there anything to note also in the other industries that saw a slide in employment? I do note, for example, construction being one of them, but really there being no surprise, as we know the headwinds that the construction sector has experienced over the past number of years.
Unfortunately, the construction sector has been the weakest of all 10 sectors in the South African economy over the past decade as a result of state capture and the emaciation of many institutions. We have seen a proliferation of corruption in many organizations that should be able to be investing in a big way. And as a consequence, there's been a massive decline in capital investment in the economy relative to consumer spending. And at the heartland of capital investment, of course, is the construction sector that has taken the biggest knock of any sector and continues to do so. We are told all the time that the government's intention is to embark and to fast track on infrastructural investment spending, but the actual data don't show it at all.
Yeah, indeed. And talking about data not showing, because I mean, officials have been talking about structural reforms to really lay a good foundation for economic growth. Is it also just a case of maybe it's not just that nothing is being done, but those are just taking longer to filter through to the actual real economy?
I would love to think that it's a case of only a matter of time.
Yeah.
But the government's been talking this way for many, many years. How long does one have to wait to see an upswing in infrastructural investment? And it's not difficult to identify the impediments here. On the one hand, you've got criminal activity and syndicates that are making life very difficult for many construction companies. And on the second big constraint is your ineptitude and a lack of competence at municipal government level, where people empowered with the ability to take decisions on projects are just not doing so because they're incompetent to do so. They've found their job as a result of cadre deployment. And secondly, there's a lot of corruption still going on in the municipal sector. And so the money is there, but it's not being spent in the right way.
Well, it is indeed a very, very grim picture. And yeah, here's to seeing what the government, and especially the government of national unity, continues to do to prop up the economy. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights there, Azar. That was Azar Jammine, Chief Economist at Econometrix.